Hi, my name is Neil Fridman, Managing Partner of Fridman Law Firm. Today I want to discuss with you different entity choices and options for startups. So at the most basic level, and the first entity type that I'll discuss today is the sole proprietorship. And in a sole proprietorship, you're operating your business either in your name or with an assumed name, also known as doing business as. The issue with the sole proprietorship is you don't have the liability protections to protect your personal assets as you would with a LLC or a corporation. So that if there is some issue or a liability that goes unpaid, a creditor could come after your personal assets, or God forbid there was a lawsuit due to a faulty product or service that you offered, they can come after your personal assets. Which leads me to the second type of entity which provides liability protection. That's the limited liability company. And LLCs allow you to protect your personal assets because you're doing business in a separate entity name, and you can operate your business under that entity name and also in a different name if you're doing a DBA or an assumed name. An LLC, if it's a single member, will be treated by the IRS as a disregarded entity for tax purposes. So, for example, if you have investment income from other sources, and let's say in your first year of operations you have losses in your LLC, you can use those to offset the gains from your other investment income. You can also choose in an LLC to be taxed as a corporation or partnership. And if you are a multi-member LLC, you'll be taxed as a partnership by default unless you choose to be taxed as a corporation. If you are a startup that intends to raise capital within the next 6, 12, 18 months, I typically will tell my clients to become a C Corp. And the reason is because an LLC has some funky issues when it comes to partnership taxation. And for example, if you are giving away grants of equity for work done by advisors or contractors, such as sweat equity, then what happens is if you do something like restricted units in an LLC, which is akin to restricted stock in a corporation, eventually when that vests, the contractors, advisors will become members of the LLC and get K-1 statements, and there can be more tax reporting and compliance and guidelines that advisors and contractors must follow. So an LLC has the ability through its operating agreement that's typically drafted by an attorney to provide for very similar compensation mechanisms as a corporation. So you can do things such as restricted units and phantom equity and things like that. Now, I want to discuss a corporation with you as the third type of entity. So we discussed the sole proprietorship, the LLC, and now we're discussing corporations. Corporations can elect to either be treated as an S corporation, or by default they'll be treated as a C corporation. The S corporation allows similar benefits of taxation similar to that of an LLC when it's taxed as a partnership, but there's some limitations on the number of shareholders, the classes, and the types of shareholders you can have in an S corp. So for most tech startups that plan to be high growth and are looking to enter the market and get venture capital funding, I would typically recommend becoming a C Corp, or initially at the outset forming or incorporating your entity as a C corporation. Now, I have plenty of clients that choose to be an LLC for many reasons, and part of that could be going back to my initial point that an LLC, through the flow-through taxation that you get when you're taxed as a partnership, for example, those profits and losses that are allocated to you can be used to offset gains from other sources of income that you may have or investments that you have. A C Corp, on the other hand, has what we call double taxation. So a C Corp pays taxes at the entity level, so you'll be filing a return with the IRS, and then upon issuance of any dividends, the individual stockholders in the corporation would pay taxes on those dividends. A lot of startups are afraid of two things with a corporation. They hear double taxation and they get scared, and the second thing is they hear corporate formalities and corporate governance with a C Corp, whereas an LLC is much more lax. And yes, that's true, but the reality is if you're forming a Delaware C Corp or New York C Corp or California C Corp, there are not that many formalities. In Delaware, for example, you have to hold one board meeting per year, which can be telephonic. It does not have to be in person. And you take actions by resolutions by the board. But in reality, there's not that many corporate formalities for a startup that is just getting going and is entering the market and bringing their MVP to market. And the second issue is people are concerned about double taxation. Now, this only comes into play because you would be taxed at both the corporate level and at the individual level when you would receive a dividend. However, tech startups and high growth companies don't issue dividends, so it's a non-issue. So at the end of the day, when a startup comes to me, I either tell them to be an LLC or a C Corp based on their individual circumstances. And the reason I say that is because for tax reasons, and all of the decisions that you'll hear me making in any of my content that I'm putting out there is going to be based first on tax decisions, then on corporate legal decisions. Tax should be driving any decisions you make because tax means money, either gained or lost in your pocket. Now with an LLC, if there is a founder who is investing a tremendous amount in intellectual property, for example, I might tell them to remain as an LLC so that they can use any of these losses in the earlier years to offset gains. But overall, if a startup wants to raise capital and issue stock options, restricted stock, cashless grants of equity or sweat equity to contractors, advisors, or other service providers, I always say go with the C Corp. And you know what happens 9 times out of 10? The clients who insist on staying as an LLC, who tell me they want to raise capital sometime in the near future but are hesitant to convert to a C Corp, they end up doing so later on at a greater expense to the company and sometimes themselves, and also causing more frustration and in the occurrence of legal fees because of that. So the bottom line is an LLC is a great entity choice. It's very flexible. It allows you to essentially put in an operating agreement, which is the governing document for an LLC. Pretty much anything that you want, that's as long as it's not in violation of the relevant law, whether it's New York or Delaware, for example, which are the states that I primarily draft documents in. So it is a very flexible entity. It doesn't have the corporate formality requirements, but in reality, the C Corp doesn't either. The C Corp is flexible. You really don't have to worry about dividend taxation in a high-tech growth startup. And the corporate formalities is really just one board meeting a year, and that can be done telephonically. So if you're out there and you want to raise capital, you want to give options, you want to incentivize contractors and advisors, I recommend that you either start as a C Corp or that you convert to a C Corp as soon as possible so that you don't incur as many expenses along the way, whether they be legal or otherwise. Thank you. By the way, you can check out, we do have a blog article on the differences between the different types of entities I've discussed on our website, fridmanlawfirm.com, and that's Fridman lawfirm.com. I know it's a very weird spelling. There should be an E in there, but my parents were from Russia, so we did not put the E in. But I thank you for your time and talk to you soon.